Welcome, everybody, to Legal Tech Week for January 31st, 2025, the last day of January, the 12th day of the Trump term, but who's counting? And this is the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation. I am Bob Ambrogi, I'm the host, and I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And we've got a nice full house of panelists today. And let's kick off with introductions. Joe, you want to go first?
Sure. Joe Patrice from Thinking Like a Lawyer and Above the Law. I did this in reverse. I always do that. I always do Above the Law first. That's weird. Anyway, I did that way, though, because Thinking Like a Lawyer is having its 400th episode
Wow.
this coming week. Yeah, I didn't even realize that, but we're having our 400th episode spectacular.
What year did you start? Do you know?
400 weeks ago,
Years.
whatever that is. What would that be? 2015, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah. So that's that.
Well, cool. I don't know how I have no idea how many episodes didn't we once figured out how many episodes we'd done in this, but that was like a year ago or something. So I have no idea where we have to figure that out. All right, Caroline.
Hi,
Did
everyone.
we have like 100?
Hi, Caroline. Sorry, Caroline Hill. I'm the editor of Legal IT Insider. Legaltechnology.com is the URL, and this year is our 30th year anniversary of the publication, which I did not start myself. As old as I feel and look.
Wow. Was that Charles who started it?
Charles
started it, right?
Charles started it 30 years ago, 1995. So all year we're celebrating our 30th year. I've been doing it 10 years, which is long enough. But yeah, he started at 95, which is amazing.
Yeah. All right. And Victor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victor Lee. I'm Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal. I don't know. I didn't know this was a big thing. The kids here are doing like a 100th day of school thing coming up next week. So they all have to so my son's class, we had to put 100 pieces of something on their shirts. We're like, why does it have to be 100? Why can't it be like a symbolic 100? Each one represents 10 or 50 but no, we had to put 100 little Pokemon things on his shirt. And that was, well, my wife did all of that. I didn't do any of it. But yeah, I didn't know that was a big thing here, but apparently all the schools here are commemorating 100 days. I'm like, okay, that's right.
It's a big anniversary show.
Really? All right. And Stephanie, what anniversary are you celebrating?
That's what I was trying to think of. None right now, I don't think. But who am I? Okay, I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I'm the Director of Content at Legal Tech Hub. I've been up for many, many hours, so forgive me. I just landed in Nashville for the Women in AI Summit this weekend, and right after this, my room is ready and I'm going to take a nap.
All right. We'll try to not get you too excited so you can fall asleep. And Niki.
My name is Niki Black. I'm the Principal Legal Insight Strategist at Affinipay, parent company of MyCase, LawPay, Case Pure, and DocketWise. I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal and Above the Law and the Daily Record. And I write and oversee our legal industry report that's coming out in a few months. I don't know if I'm celebrating. I'm not celebrating any anniversaries. I'm not celebrating anything right now. I don't feel that.
Well, we're celebrating having you here. I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but this is technically my 30th year of writing about legal tech, because I don't really know when I first wrote about legal tech, but the first thing that I can find it's like recordable, that's still available, was published 30 years ago when I started writing a column about lawyers using the internet and why lawyers should use the internet. And of course, it was a print column because there were no lawyers on the internet in those days. And so it was circulated. It was a syndicated column that we circulated out to a bunch of different publications and made lawyers think they should be on the internet, or tried to.
That is awesome. So you started at the same time as Charles Christian, pretty much.
Yeah, but I didn't know anything about that. I mean, in those days we didn't even know there were other countries on the other side of the ocean. It was like still they hadn't drawn all the maps yet. It was kind of a weird thing. Yeah, no, I didn't know Charles until much later, but
Sorry. The first
yeah,
article he wrote, or the first rag, was talking about how law firms should get this thing called a website,
yeah,
which was pretty cool. We still got it on the site. It's just amazing.
yeah, yeah. No, I used to do a publication. I don't know if Dennis Kennedy's here. I used to do an annual like awards thing, and Dennis was one of our judges, who's still often in our audience here. And yeah, it goes way, way back. Which actually leads me to maybe the first thing I kind of just want to talk take a second to talk about, because I wrote something about this today. But I have sometimes had people come up to me and call me the OG of legal tech reporting, which I wasn't. As you say, Charles was there and others, but even before Charles or before me, there was a guy named Barry Bear. Did any of you guys ever know Barry?
No.
Barry was the legal tech writer guy for a long time. Barry started in 1979 doing a column, law office, what do you call it? I forgot. Law Office Technology Review. And it was a column that was syndicated to a lot of legal newspapers, which there were a lot of legal newspapers in those days, legal magazines, and he was, and you go to ABA Tech Show, you go to Legal Week, any of those things, he was the guy who was there. He, I said this to somebody, and they thought that this was an offensive thing to say, but he had like a little bit of Columbo in him. He was always a little kind of disheveled, and always like carrying a couple of different briefcases and a ton of different computer equipment and stuff, but really brilliant, and really he was a lawyer, practicing lawyer, who started writing about tech 'cause he was interested in it. And I'm saying all this because he died this week. He died this week at the age of 81. And so I wrote a little bit of a remembrance about him this morning. But it's also kind of weird because he wrote so much, but you can find almost none of it online anymore. And back in the day, I don't know, were any of you guys in remember Counsel Connect or know anything of, like the first sort of online thing for lawyers back in the day was this thing, Counsel Connect, that American Lawyer Media had started, their first sort of web community for lawyers. And there were some people who were very active in that and sort of served as hosts and moderators, and Barry was also one of those people. So he was, at the time, Barry was the kind of leading person talking about legal tech, and he was one of those people, sort of like Monica Bay had been, who just did not take bullshit from vendors. I mean, if there was a press conference, as I mentioned, the little thing I wrote up, there in fact were physical press conferences in those days. As a matter of fact, that's how I first met Charles Christian, was at a press event in New York, I think, way back when. If Barry was at your press event and he raised his hand to ask a question, you were probably getting a little nervous because he was going to ask a tough question. And hey, Julie.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Introductions right now?
Sorry, we did that. We're past that, but yeah, we can do that.
I read about legal tech in Canada. There we go.
And you're outside. Are you outside? No. Or is
No,
that a
I'm
background?
inside. That
Oh,
looks like it's outside because I live in Canada. So,
I get it. Okay. Okay. Well, you could be like traveling. You could be like somewhere warm and exotic or something. All right. Anyways, actually, I was just talking about this guy Barry. What we were talking about was like, what were we talking about? Anniversaries, kind of, or commemorations of years of things. Caroline was pointing out, it's 30 years ago her publication started. 30 years ago, I started writing about legal tech, and I was just talking about somebody I wrote about today who just died, who has been writing about legal tech since well before any of us. So Barry was Barry's a great guy, and somebody who was kind of ubiquitous in the legal tech world. And sorry to see him go. And somebody was also reminding me that he also was a bit of a musician, and we would. There used to be this thing called the editor exchange. Victor, did you ever make it to one of that? I feel like you might have been at one of those. Monica was at them, but there used to be this annual meeting of all the editors of legal publications, and it was a little bit of educational stuff and a whole lot of drinking and fun. And Barry would be known to sit down at the piano and play a couple tunes now and then as well at those events. So anyway,
Someone pointed out, Bob, that if you look at the Wayback Machine, you can find, and they searched for Laura
oh,
Hoffa's
good
technology
idea. Yeah.
review. And actually, I'm doing it as you talk, and
Yeah.
it looks like there's a ton of articles from like 2007 and like even maybe a little like 2006, 2007. So there's perhaps a way of finding some of this old stuff that he wrote, which is
Yeah,
cool.
and I was looking at a reference I had to his site where what I had said at the time was that he didn't publish his articles on his own website. He would publish little summaries, and you would have to email him if you wanted the full article. But most of his articles were published in other publications, and I know he wrote on for the predecessor to Legal Tech News, the Law Technology News. Wrote for them, and he wrote for I'm sure he probably wrote for all of the ABA publications at some point, but a lot of just local state and bar publications and that sort of thing. And I know that I ran him back when I used to be at the Lawyers Weekly publications, and we ran his column way back then. But good guy, and sorry to see that he, as a matter of fact, he had, I also mentioned in my little thing that he had emailed me last year to tell me he kind of sits in occasionally on this show and was in the audience occasionally on this show. And in his sort of slightly irascible way, when he wrote that to me, he also had to like insert a critique of something we had said or done on one of the recent episodes, just to let me know he wasn't letting me off easily on anything. But that was kind of Barry. So. All right. Well, so Julie, also, I'm not sure whether you picked a story. I didn't see a story in the log from you, so you can let me know if you've got something in the chat, or we can just talk about it later. But probably start with DeepSeek. We've got a couple of different stories from panelists this week about it, and it's been all in the news obviously this week. Well, overshadowed by other crazy news that keeps happening, but still quite a bit in the news this week. And Stephanie and Caroline, you both wrote about it, and Stephanie, maybe kind of start with you, and we can go to Caroline, because your article was, why is everybody talking about DeepSeek? So why is everybody talking about DeepSeek?
Yeah, so I have my Tuesday column where I just I have to come up with something every week to talk about, and I was like, okay, anything anyone's talked about for the last 36 hours has been DeepSeek. So
and Julie wanted to talk about DeepSeek. So awesome, we're all DeepSeek, all in.
But yeah, so I sort of went.
She froze her voice.
Cocktail
Oh
there's an
no,
overview of like
stopped her from talking.
The Chinese government does not want us to hear her thoughts on DeepSeek.
Wait, was I cut off?
Yeah,
Maybe
you
the
were.
maybe the U.S.
You're
government
say
doesn't
something
want it.
bad.
True.
Remember,
I know.
DeepSeek is awesome. CCP, great.
I feel like I said it was the cocktail party overview, and they were like, nope. I'm like, okay, but that was like I went for like the high level of here are like the main points of why people are talking about it, because it really was like I don't remember. I can send it to actually everybody and not just the hosts and panelists who have seen it. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's been since like GPT-4 came out that anyone was this like crazy frenzied about a specific model or whatever. But I mean, the main takeaways in your cocktail party overview, I'm gonna keep saying that see if it cuts me out, was that, massive computational power, lower costs. I mean, which potentially means lower environmental costs. It's all open source, which is huge. So I think that's where the real benefit we might see going forward is going to be, because right now the cons are strong. They're hosting your data in China and they're censoring things, but the model is available free, open source, so if people can take it and host it not in the DeepSeek infrastructure. The ability, like, so I was at the, Christian Lang does the New York legal tech meetups.
Cool.
And so I was at that last night, and one of the vendors doing a demo already said that by the end of the week, they'll have the model in their product. So obviously not like taking the free, the open source one and putting it in. So yeah, it's just like, it really just sort of blew everyone's minds in a way that I haven't seen in a while, which is why I just literally wrote the why is everyone talking about it. So I'm curious to see what it does, since multiple other people picked it. I don't need to monopolize the conversation on it, but
Yeah. Caroline, you also wrote about, what were your thoughts on it?
So I quoted Christian, actually. He was one of the people in the piece that I wrote. I quoted Christian Lang, because obviously Lega is all about, helping people to use different models and explore them safely. So I started off by talking about, everyone got completely hysterical. It's really funny because the internet suddenly became really expert on lots of stuff that people are really not expert in, which made me laugh. Like GPUs, like suddenly we're all expert in like what NVIDIA's models are, and which really made me laugh. But so the privacy thing, I started out in my piece talking about the privacy side of things. Like everyone was saying, your data will be stored, your data will be used, your data will be read by the Chinese government. You can't opt out, and all of those things are true. And if you go to the web-based public model of DeepSeek, then you can't put anything in that's confidential, right? But your point about open source is obviously super important, because nobody, down the line, particularly, people won't have to use the web-based public app, right? Because it's open source, you can use the code, you can put it on a server in your own environment, and you can use it completely safely. And as you said, so whether that be law firms, which will be the more sophisticated ones, particularly, will be doing it once they've worked out. No one, there's obviously sort of questions, and everyone's being cautious about it, but they're going to be people that are people that are already exploring it, talking to clients about it. Vendors are already looking at how they can use the code, because as you said, the amazing thing is about the cost, right? So we've seen this sort of dominance of OpenAI and a small number of tech, sort of conglomerates. And what this does, someone compared it, someone at Adelshaw Goddard, which I think is really progressive, a UK top 20 law firm, they compared it to, like, now they've introduced a $50 iPhone, right? And they've blown the market up, and they've made Gen AI so much more accessible. So what that's going to mean, and this is where Christian is like delighted, because he's like going, you need to take control of this. It means that instead of having a few select vendors who are going to be, providing Gen AI products, there's going to be a wave of it. So I call my articles "The Floodgates Are Open." There's going to be questions downstream about provenance, and things that, like, do you use this because apparently one of the things is that DeepSeek trained their model using OpenAI, which is really funny, and everyone's like really
that's
outraged,
hilarious. Yes.
right? And then it's really funny because OpenAI ate the whole of the internet, including everybody's copyright, allegedly. And so obviously it's really funny. Like, it's like, so who's in the right, who's in the wrong? Anyway, there's going to be tons of arguing about this, and it's a question of, if you get somewhere down the track of using this, are there going to be challenges around IP and copyright? There's all sorts of stuff, but the bottom line is the genie. We've talked about genie being out of the bottle. It really is out of the bottle now.
Yeah, those headlines we were sharing, we have a Slack amongst us that along the lines of OpenAI is complaining that DeepSeek stole all the data they already stole from us. Like, it's just such a it's such a great moment.
But, I mean,
Possession is
what-
9/10 of the law. I stole it, so I
Yeah.
own it, right?
I don't know
mean,
if anyone on this call has seen Conclave,
Yes.
which is our new version of Mean Girls.
Amazing.
No, I thought the PC was mine, and you have stolen it from me. I just,
Yeah.
and OpenAI, I'm just like, do you think any press is good press at this point? Yeah, I really think this is going to be a game changer, particularly for startups who are trying to enter this market, who haven't had full access to OpenAI as others. And I've spoken to many off the record who are saying, it's getting more expensive, right? And we know that OpenAI's model is already changed between free and paid and all of that. The whole idea of open source is just, it's just so delicious. Like, what is going to happen to all of this? But we all know that people are still going to use that free web-based product, even though they shouldn't, because they do with
Yeah.
ChatGPT now. So
Yeah.
Well, and that's the story that I just finished, and I don't even know if it's up yet. But Fox Rothschild has already banned their attorneys from using DeepSeek, the main DeepSeek, for all these reasons, and they cite like the security issues with China. And all I could think is, yeah, it's not just that though, right? Like if you have associates who are or attorneys of any stripe who are using any consumer-facing free AI and plugging it full of client data, then you have a deeper frigging problem than DeepSeek. Like, don't just make a DeepSeek. You got a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes you need to have that boogeyman to kind of scare people, right? In this case, it's the Chinese government, and like, you know, I mean, well, for me, like, I thought of that scene. Did anyone see that? Was it Pirates of Silicon Valley, the movie with Noah Wiley as Steve Jobs and
Yeah.
Anthony Michael Hall as
Yes.
so like, yeah, like, so that scene when like Steve Jobs realizes that Microsoft ripped him off, he gets mad, and then Bill Gates is like, well, hey, you know, you're just mad because we took Xerox's stuff before, you know, like we took Xerox's stuff and we got there before you did. So it's kind of like, yeah, all's fair in love and war, right? I mean, and also, what are you going to do? You're gonna go after the Chinese government for taking this data? Yeah, good luck with that. But yeah, I mean, again, this kind of raises a lot of questions, sort of like how do you ethically use this stuff? And yeah, if law firms, especially like, you know, a big firm at Fox Rothschild, if their lawyers are plugging this information into free, you know, free consumer programs like this, then yeah, like Joe said, you got a bigger problem than anything that the Chinese government can do to you.
But
But
what
there's
about
also
the fact that DeepSeek had a cyber attack like on day 2 of its launch? And you know, and I think I read a couple articles that talked about the fact that it's less DeepSeek or even China, and it's more just it's more that this was a very new startup that didn't have its, you know, T's crossed and its I's dotted. And so that, I think that's more the problem. I mean, granted, they're all kind of new startups, but some have more longevity than others. And so I don't think anyone should be jumping on the bandwagon. And what was revealed was everybody's searches. So, I mean, that's a pretty big problem. I don't know if y'all saw that. I'll put that in the chat, but
yeah.
you know, I mean, talk about
And
confidentiality
They're
issues.
monitoring it, or they're monitoring keystrokes, they're monitoring prompts, it's not even if you just put confidential client information. In this case, they're monitoring, they can harvest your private information, anything that you put in to whatever extent that's valuable.
This was a cyber attack where the data was actually released. It wasn't just the fact that the user agreement says that they're doing this.
well,
It
it was
was-
also like overnight suddenly the most downloaded app in the world. So obviously cyber attackers are going to be like, ooh, let's go for that.
yeah, and it's open source, and I mean, I'm not surprised by the hacks, and even this idea of it's tracking keystrokes and everything. I don't think people remember when Google put out its AI platform and the roar about its privacy policy, or Microsoft with Copilot. Like, that's calling the kettle black as well. Like, these companies are trying to track as much of our personal data as possible. China obviously takes it to the next level, but it's all kosher in this industry, and I'm really curious about the regulatory implementation, like all of this, because, you know, people keep talking about how do we regulate AI. Well, China has now created something that possibly could be the dominant backbone in terms of how people build their LLMs.
And
So what happens there?
But I'm also curious about the perception question, because like, yes, people are like, oh, this China product bad. But like, if you take the open source code, if you go take the open source model and move it somewhere else, you in theory, I mean, I'm not gonna be the first to try it, but you in theory, like, mitigate a lot of those concerns. But is there a perception issue? So like last night, one vendor very publicly was like, I've gotten a million questions. If I'm gonna put it in my tool, I'll have it by the end of the week. Whereas another vendor, before it started, we were just chatting. He's like, what do you think if we were to go and do it and said we had that model, would people wrongly equate it with the public one? And would that be a bad thing for us to do from a perception perspective?
hopefully we can all start to
Yeah, but
educate.
I was like,
You
I
know,
think
it's
we're 3 days in, and yeah.
you think people in this industry might be slightly more savvy. I mean, I know there could be some really dumb things going on, but you know, you'd think that there'd be a little bit more understanding. There seems to be more information. You know, we're all writing about this. Everybody's talking about it. You know,
Yeah.
you'd hope that people and they just have to communicate. But yeah, I'm sure they'll, you know, instinctively there'll be lots of questions and people,
Yeah.
some people panicking.
Are you all getting the vendor? I mean, a lot of vendors just won't even tell me what models they're using anymore, or they'll all say, you know, we're using a hybrid approach and using, you know, whatever model fits whatever task,
Well, I
but they won't
mean,
be specific about it. I'm sure if they're going through an RFP process, they're going to have to be more explicit about it. But I'm surprised at how many just won't even tell me anymore when I ask them that question.
Mm.
Yeah, I've been getting the same thing as well. I still remember an interview recently where someone said a little bit of a mix of this, and it was so vague. I was like, I would get more detail from a 5-year-old about like what goes in orange juice. Like
Yeah.
it was so vague. I think we in terms of education of the profession on things like what is open source and how to keep LLMs secure and internal LLMs and small LLMs. No, we're not there yet. We have not hit critical mass, and so we actually need to look at what happened with TikTok in that debate. People are still confused about why TikTok banned or not. You know, the ownership, what the privacy securities are or concerns are or not. So I would really caution us saying that lawyers should be sophisticated to understand that like you can separate the tech from the political things that are happening in China, because I think it gets really messy. And then OpenAI is talking about infringing copyright, and then they're going to be like, oh, I thought there's all these lawsuits going on about copyright. So I do think this is going to be another year, yay, where we educate lawyers about all these different pieces and get back to the bigger issues of cybersecurity. But at the same time, don't let this stop you from using it. No law firm should say, I don't want to use DeepSeek. No startup should say, I don't want to use it, because it is open source. Someone is going to create better code for this, like within what, a few days?
well, that's why I was saying, like, even like I wrote my article on Tuesday, and like it's probably out of date now, 3 days later, because this DeepSeek is moving so fast.
I published mine at 6 o'clock yesterday, 6:30. And not really an ideal time for our market, but I was literally like, I've just got to get it done. I've just got to get it out before something happens.
Well, that's why I picked it for my Tuesday thing. I'm like, well, it's right now, and I will explicitly say this is as of today. Yeah.
It
Have
was
any of
really
you used it?
Mm-mm.
I've tried to. It was, they've got a freeze. Like I haven't even been
Well,
able
after it was hacked, they froze.
Yeah,
got it
so
on-
I wasn't one of the
downloaded it onto my phone and I asked it 2 questions and then I deleted it. I was like, well, okay, it works, and that was it.
There was an
Yeah,
interesting.
I will say this though. And this is okay for me to say. The fact that China figured out how to make something cheaper, so it's on brand.
100% co-signed, Victor. 100%. And I'm not surprised. They've foreshadowed this months ago with the work that they're doing in quantum computing and AI, a long time ago. Yeah.
But they don't know. There's a lot of misinformation, isn't there? And they don't know 100%. This is where the whole GPU and how much it costs to train it, and lots of people talking a lot of crap about stuff that nobody, including me, and there are some people that do, obviously, but there's a lot of people that are expert now, and that they obviously, you know, they say they use X number of GPUs and they're of X quality and $6 million, but there's a lot of speculation that actually they got in there before the sanctions and that they bought a lot of better quality NVIDIA GPUs, and you know, I think that sort of thing as well. Like partly in the piece that I wrote, I was like, you know, to a certain extent now it really doesn't matter because actually it has bolted and people can use, as we've talked about many times now in this session, you know, the code and actually it's out, right? Those kind of things, they'll be argued about by regulators, OpenAI, China, America. It was interesting how it was ironic with the timing of TikTok just having escaped being banned and then this all happening and not I thought the US took a very relaxed stance to it, really, like which was quite ironic, but But regulators around the globe are starting to ask.
I think around the
What
globe is the
was
key
answers?
point there, because I don't think we're going to have any regulations for the next 4 years. So
Yeah,
don't
I was
worry
like,
about
we
it.
also are at minimal
Or
capacity to react to
regulators.
things. Like so much is going on. We're like, eh. But I will
They
say
will
on the
do
open also on the open source front though. So I mean, we talked about Clem from 273 Ventures a while back. So, the first like fairly trained small language model. They just put their entire data set open source on Hugging Face. So
Who did? I meant you.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that.
273 Ventures, Clem, the
oh,
small.
Yeah, I saw that. Mike
Mike
Bomarito.
Mike Bomarito.
I saw.
Yeah, so they
I
put
cool.
that out. Yeah, they just put that out open source now too, which is interesting.
Good.
So yeah.
All I want to know is, do I buy or sell NVIDIA? It's been such a crazy week on the market in terms of how the impact this had on like NVIDIA crashed, then it started going on, then it had like its best day ever, and it's like nobody knows what the heck to do.
You just keep your head. It's like over the years, we've gone through similar things. You just don't pay attention for a little while. You don't look at your retirement accounts. You just let it all sit and you wait till the dust settles and then you look. Otherwise, you go crazy, right? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Buy and sell.
There was an interesting piece yesterday on the ever listen to Marketplace. It's an NPR show, or I think, and they had a piece on Google. Well, they had a piece on Bing. I think yesterday was like the second or something anniversary of Bing, and how basically nobody in the world is using Bing, who even knows what Bing is, but how like a year ago everybody was saying OpenAI and other LLM-based sort of search would be the death knell of Google search, and how a year later, after people kind of made that declaration, Google's usage has not dropped a bit, and people are still using Google just as much, and not a lot of people are using any of the generative AI sort of based search tools. I thought that was interesting. I mean, I'm finding that I do tend to use some of the AI search tools. I don't use the OpenAI, but I love Perplexity, and I use that an awful lot. What are you guys thinking about? Are you guys using any of these tools for search, or what are you doing?
I hardly ever use Google. I use OpenAI to get any kind of information. Businesses and stuff, I'll use Google, but besides that, what do I want Google for? I don't know.
Yeah.
ChatGPT is so great at like finding, if you just like say you're researching an article and you're like, you could just chat to, it will provide you. I know that obviously you have to be careful, and I don't use it to write stuff. I use it to kind of, if I'm thinking about, find me, are there examples of that? I was talking about Windows 11, right? Windows 11 being whether people are having a seamless experience. It was a real techie thing amid a bunch of AI stuff. Anyway, I was like, how are people finding bringing upgrading from Windows 10 to Windows 11, and what's been written about it, and what are the difficulties, and anyway, and it came up with a whole chatty kind of, and this is what the American Bar Council have written about it, and these are the sources, and it was just so easy, and this is some of the guidance, and this is how people have found the user experience, and as I went, what have law firms talked about this at all? And it's just brilliant.
Yeah, I find that's what I like the fact that you just get answers, right? Instead of having to like try and figure things out. I had something coming up the other day where I had a briefing come up as sort of a last minute, and I didn't have much time to prepare for it. So I went to Perplexity and said, "Tell me everything again about this." And in a second, I had this wonderful outline of everything, basically everything I wanted to know, so I could kind of go into this meeting sounding like I was halfway prepared, even though I really wasn't. But it's useful for things like that.
I feel like I still have the force of habit.
We're gonna
Want to do that, like, yeah, exactly, something like what, or I just I'm in Nashville, like what's the closest, my room's not ready, where can I get, like, pull up the map,
Yeah.
but like actual other things I'm always
So, yeah,
in my brain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a child of Boolean searches, so it's hard for me to walk too far away from that. But I will say, I will concur that Perplexity is pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't I think I'm with Nicole on this. Or not Nikki, sorry, on this. I don't use any of these tools I don't even use Google anymore. I use DuckDuckGo because I like the privacy search, and because I'm usually looking for something in Canada and something obscure because I like to find people that no one has been talking to. Um, the, those LLMs are just not that good for that. And so I haven't, but I do use them for things like, can you write this social media post a little bit better? Or give me, or something like totally like germane, like give me an outline for like an intake form if I was hiring someone new, like just very random general knowledge type of things, but something really specific like for research that I'm writing an article about, never use those tools.
It does a pretty good job of finding me stuff I've written in the past. So like I'm writing about this thing and I'm like, what have I done in the past? Like what key arguments, whatever. It does a decent job of coming back and being like, you wrote this thing, you said that this was stupid a year ago, just so you know. And that's been useful to me.
I have a question for the panelists on this. Because as we know, there's pending litigation from authors about these tools stealing our stuff without compensation to make them smart. Like morally, I don't like that I didn't get my 5 cents or $1 for the use of hundreds of my articles. And so I don't ever search my stuff in any LLM or even like even something that I wrote where I've asked it. I don't write something and ask it to rewrite it. I don't do that. But like morally, I just feel like as a writer, you already stole from me, so I'm not going to give you any more. I don't know. Maybe that's a high and mighty. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's certainly the debate, right? I tend to view the training work as akin to kind of that what's the legal concept, like the final sale, like whatever, like the argument they used to have in law school about how if you buy a book, you can now sell that book. You can't copy that book, but you can sell the book you have. And I kind of viewed a lot of the training stuff as, like they copied things that people had, but not for the purpose of selling the copy, but for the purpose of learning how to read. So I've taken a much more liberal view of it like that. I know, like Tech Dirt, I know has a similar view as I do, but I know we're kind of the minority.
But how do you avoid it? I mean, if you search for something involving a lot of my searches involve legal tech. So when I search for something that involves legal tech, I find out often the results are me or one of you on this panel. I mean, those are the sources. So it's hard to avoid that.
Yeah, I perhaps Julie, I think you're probably the right thought, but I feel like there's no point now because it's kind of done, and there's no and if I don't use it, I'm kind of cutting my nose off to spite my face because if I don't use it, nothing's going to change, and actually it could be so helpful. And also I started out by making myself use it because I felt like I was writing about people should really familiarize themselves with it, and then I wasn't using it myself. So I was like, okay, you really need to sort of practice what you preach. So I started to use it, and actually there are some things that I just would not use it for, and I don't use it for writing. We've talked about this before. You feel like that, but it's great at headings. We've talked about that before as well. I'm really bad at headings, so quite often I'll take my really crappy heading and I'll go, "Could you make this good?" If you were a legal tech publication with a good heading that was something like this, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, I use that for headings a lot too, because sometimes it's just because sometimes like you get so far in the weeds on things, and then you just it's hard to then just kind of change gear and just be okay, now I got to come up with this snazzy headline that'll just draw everybody in and summarize everything that I did. So sometimes you want to have that detachment that okay, like please take a look at this and come up with something and blah blah blah. If it's good, I mean, and you can always just say no, I'm not going to use it, and or then just be like, okay, well, I'll use that, but then I'll tweak a little bit, or so you still have that control. You're not bound to it or anything.
Exactly.
And as for the other point about like using all articles to train it, I guess it's different for me because I don't get paid per post or anything like that. Like I just it's all work for hire for me, so it doesn't really matter to me so much because it's not like it's money out of my pocket at the end of the day. So I guess that's the way I look at it. I mean, I would just rather be accurate than that trumps commercial considerations for me. But it'll be different if I were relying on that. I mean, I admit that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more like you, Julie. I don't even use it that much professionally. Like I recently discovered the joy
The
of
joy
library. I
of
can suggest things like
Joy of
that.
what?
Are, oh, no, I know. It's just like, oh my
No,
gosh, if
you cut out for a
oh,
minute right after joy of.
no.
We're like,
The
God
joy of
damn.
Definitely.
making a travel itinerary, to make that clear, is what I just
We should explain to you because it feels like whenever you talk, we're like all laughing. But so basically, it's like you freeze, and then not just then, but before it goes really fast. So you freeze, and then it goes. Which is
The
really
joy
I
of
love this.
pantomime. Was it the joy
I
of
love this
pantomime?
for me. I'm just gonna stop talking now.
No. You sound great now. Actually, I'm just explaining like why we're laughing because it's just
Yeah.
like.
Anyway, great for travel itineraries. I use it far less for work sort of stuff. I do love the headline game, but usually it'll give me like 10 and I'll mash like 3 of them together in a way. And like, yeah.
One of my favorite things to do is use it in place of my husband. So, and I'm always like, who was that woman in that show who did what?
Oh, I'm like the
They'll be
joy of
like,
what?
and
No.
she had red hair, and he's like, and he always knows who I'm talking about, even though it's the most vague description. So I'll be like, what's the word that kind of sounds like this, but it means this? And half the time it's like, it totally tells me the word. I'm like, that's the one. Like when I can't think of the word and I know there's a really good word out there, or just like when I'm trying to come up with some vague concept. Sometimes it gets, and other times I get really mad at it. I'm like, no, not that one. No, not that one. And finally I'm like, all right, I got to stop yelling at the computer and just leave the chat bot alone. But it's like
See,
a
we
little,
use our smart device for that. We got our Google Home device because my wife, for whatever reason, she's like, is so and so still alive? Like, is Meatloaf alive, or is Paul Allen still alive? And most of the time I'll be like, no, they're dead. But she's no, I don't think so. So then we'll be like, hey, Google, is blah 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 still alive? So so we do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe move on to a couple of other things real quick in the time we have left. One just on the topic of bad headlines or using something to help get headlines. I used a headline this week about putting a nail in the coffin of something, and I thought, how many times have I used putting a nail in the coffin of something over the years? But it's generally with reference to the cloud, or rather with respect to on-premises stuff and moving to the cloud. And of course, this is I know Niki, a topic near and dear to your heart for having written about the cloud for many years. But I thought it was significant this week that Relativity announced that in fact it is now. It didn't quite say sunset. But it has announced a date after which all new cases getting loaded up into Relativity will have to go onto its cloud-based Relativity One platform, and they will no longer now allow new cases to start on its server platform, its on-prem platform. It will continue to support sort of grandfather cases that were already on there. Then it also said a couple of exceptions, maybe for geographic issues or other issues where there just may not be an ability to use the cloud. But I mean, given the fact that Relativity is really kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the e-discovery space, and that its on-premises technology was for a long time really the probably I think the most used e-discovery technology out there, and one that I know that having worked as a consultant to an e-discovery company myself, companies were always trying to get potential customers to get off of Relativity and get onto their platforms. So it seems like one of those, okay, this really is the nail in the coffin of on-premises products and maybe the last straw in terms of moving things to the cloud. So it seemed like a significant moment.
I saw your story and I thought the same thing. And it just took me back to when I was starting to write my book that almost, I think, didn't get published because there were so many people that opposed what I was saying. And I had so many peer reviews of that book, I can't even tell you. But there were so many people that would sort of act like I was being blasphemous by suggesting lawyers use the cloud, and that it was so irresponsible. And it's so interesting to see now that we're on the other side where the cloud is the norm. And in fact, it's pretty much, people are suggesting it's far more secure than on premises at this point. And it's just such a, you know, U-turn, and it's so interesting. And that definitely made me sort of revisit that when I saw that story that you'd written, though. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I saw the story, it reminded me of Clio and their not battle, but their conflict with the Law Society of British Columbia, because they're of course a cloud-based software, and you know, LSBC coming out and saying you can't do that way back in, I forget when that was now, 2007 or 20. It's a quite been a minute. And now I think as a practicing attorney, if you said everything was paper or in a local server and not the cloud, I think you actually would get in some trouble, because the best practices have completely switched. And so, yeah, when I saw that article, I thought, if anyone ever asks me, you know, has legal tech had any real change in the practice of law? Yes, because Relativity is saying we're switching completely to the cloud. Like that is a generational shift, you know.
Right.
But it presents challenges for users, doesn't it? Because I think we're at this stage where a few of the vendors are now saying you have to move to the cloud, you have to move to, or you have to move to our latest cloud or whatever. But actually some of they're like, it depends, you know, not necessarily Relativity, but it's creating compatibility issues amongst some vendors, right? So you've got law firms who are being forced to move to the latest cloud, whatever it might be, multi-tenant cloud, and they've got other products, maybe from that same vendor, where there's a different stage of development and it may not work with the latest version of the cloud, right? So you're being forced to move. You have got different types of products. They're not all compatible with one another. And I've spoken to people that are like, they're trying to manage, as well as with all of the latest stuff with Gen AI, you know, you think this cloud stuff has sort of been put to bed, and but it's not. They're still wrestling with all of this stuff behind the scenes, just getting their core infrastructure right, you know, getting everything in the cloud, making sure everything works, making sure that, you know, they're taking care of all of the regulatory obligations. And I feel like it's a really complex time for firms trying to manage this transition.
I also
Yeah.
find it interesting because, you know, the last 2 years at Relativity Fest, when we've gone to that they started doing those little media group briefing things. And the first one 2 years ago, they were just very adamant of like, we are not abandoning on-prem. No, do not pass go. We are not doing that. And then last year they were not quite as firm, but still pretty firm of like, we're not going anywhere with our on-prem solution anytime soon. And then suddenly now, yeah.
Yeah, of course not subtle. I mean, they gave 3 years notice, like so. Clearly,
True, fair
they
point, yeah.
understand this is a pain point for some of their customers. But I don't know if you remember back in 2017 when they, I mean 2017 when they rolled out Relativity One in the first place, it created such a stir because you know so much of the way they kind of get businesses through this whole network of partners, consultants, whatever you call them, who you know help law firms use their product, and so many of those consultants were all based on you know the on-premises software and were set up to use the on-premises software, and they felt like suddenly they were you know there was this concern even when they just first launched Relativity One that they were somehow being abandoned, or that Relativity was going to kind of leapfrog over them and leave them in the dust. And they were able to, I think, kind of smooth that out with a lot of those vendors at the time. But you know, this is just it's another turning point in the move to the cloud.
That's an interesting point too, though. Most legal technology, like IT consultants, before the cloud, their job was to maintain the servers, to address the conflicts every time you uploaded new software, you know, every year. And all the software would conflict with each other when you would put new software on the servers. And once you take the server out of the equation, they're just left with like updating the other hardware, like computers and stuff, which don't need to be dealt with nearly as often. And so it's been interesting to watch them, you know, raise a fuss about having to pivot, but eventually pivot. You know, some of them have completely pivoted into actually owning companies that do something all together that are sort of cloud related, or that help people navigate the cloud or test out cloud platforms, or but it's interesting to see how they've tried to find other ways to monetize what they do, where there's a recurring, it's not just a one stop help me choose the product, but you're going to need to keep coming back to me. And I think some of them are still trying to figure that out, but that's another thing that's been interesting to watch occur alongside the cloud transition.
Yeah. Should we jump over to from the cloud to the Dakotas and talk about different approaches to the bar exam there, Victor?
I was wondering where you were going with that segue. There are a lot of clouds in the Dakotas, so I guess maybe that.
I'm not sure I've ever been to either Dakota.
No, I mean I've never been to. I mean, at one point I wanted to see Mount Rushmore, but I was just like, yeah, I don't need to go, I guess.
North Dakota is one of 2 states I have not been to, and I'm pretty sure it'll be the last one. Yeah.
Yeah, so
they're gonna redo Mount Rushmore pretty soon anyway with a new image on it.
We're gonna get rid of all the other 4 and just it'll be
yeah.
So yeah, so it's North Dakota and South Dakota. This is trying to access the justice angle. Also, just the fact that they don't have a lot of lawyers there, so they both came up with alternative pathways to licensure, and they announced them. And so the story was published this past week. So in South Dakota, what they're going to do is they're going to let law students in the 5th semester, so that'd be first semester of 3rd year, the year where they bore you to death in law school. You could do 500 hours of public service, and then from there you could then go on and practice. But I think it's very limited. I think they're starting off with only 10 students from the University of South Dakota School of Law. So obviously we'll see how that goes. Whether that catches on. And then North Dakota, they're actually going to have an apprenticeship program that would allow you to just have a 4-year degree, as opposed to having to go to law school. Obviously, you have to have I think it's 2,000 hours of supervised training over 5 years, and then you have to sit for the bar exam. But you could theoretically then be admitted without ever going to law school, which would be a pretty good cost savings for people. Although I don't think University of North Dakota Law School's tuition is that expensive, but still, it's better than nothing. So yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how these go. But they're both pretty radical solutions, it seems. But again, it's not going to affect a large segment, because we're still talking like very, very small population centers, very, very limited number of initial participants in the program. But it'll be interesting to kind of see where they go. And they're both pretty. Yeah, I thought they were both pretty radical solutions, much more so than anything we've seen even out of Oregon and like California. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
Yeah, you're skipping over the most radical of the solutions proposed, which was North Dakota proposed that if you didn't go to law school and you aren't really qualified or whatever, you could also win election to the state legislature and serve a term and then automatically get in. This is, in fact, something they said.
That's about on brand for North Dakota. I mean, although they weren't the state where they had a governor that shot a dog and like bragged about it, and it worked out for her. But that's about on brand for North Dakota, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely North Dakota. I used to live in Saskatchewan, as some people know, which is of course the border province with North Dakota. And that is
or as we call it, North Dakota.
Yes, exactly. I'm actually very encouraged as someone who's spoken to some folks from the bar associations from both of those states, that they're actually moving forward at all with any of these ideas, because they've been talking about it for quite a while. And you mentioned the numbers are quite low, so I actually think it has a higher impact. Saskatchewan has only 2,000 lawyers for a place of 1 million people, like spread out over a huge geographic area, which it describes both North and South Dakota. And so even though this is small numbers, I think it can have a big impact in terms of just increasing the number of attorneys in these jurisdictions, because that is such a big, I know that's a big problem everywhere, but in these particular places, like 10 more people can have an even bigger impact than like 100 or 1,000 more in Illinois.
I was talking this week to Nicole Nelson, who's the CEO of this frontline justice organization that's working to bring justice worker, expand the concept of justice workers around the country. And the point she made several times while we were talking is just that one of the keys to to addressing the access to justice crisis is just lowering the barriers to entry for people to be able to deliver legal help of some kind. And it sounds like that's what this would do. And for that reason, if nothing else, it sounds like a good idea. Speaking of access to justice, we got all of couple of minutes. Niki, do you want to talk about your want to give us a quick recap of your story on
Yeah.
tools for access to justice?
I mean, what I did was I've kind of been exploring different angles on AI and access to justice, and I sort of brought it all together and added to it for my ABA journal column, all the different things I'd kind of been rolling around in my head and tossing around. And what I sort of covered is sort of the different ways that you can use AI to kind of bridge the access to justice gap. And, one of them is building AI into the software lawyers are already using, like law practice management, legal billing, document management, legal research, so that they can get their work done even quicker. And, I've had lawyers reached out to me telling me that whatever tools they happen to be used when the AI gets brought into it, some of them, one guy was an assigned counsel attorney who said he's taking on far more cases now than he used to because AI helps him streamline everything so much. So, that's one way. And then another way is to, you're going to have to deal with, be patient with my flu-addled mind right now.
Just ask your husband.
He's right over there, but I don't know if he's going to be able to answer this question.
I think we meant your ChatGPT replacement husband.
All right, that'll know, right? Yeah. And then another way is to roll out generative AI. Oh God, I'm gonna have to pull the article up. One way is using courts and
Courts, yeah.
legal aid organizations using generative AI on their sites to enable people to either self-help or get access to services quicker or learn how to navigate. And then Victor, what's the third one? I'm having a mind blank just because I'm telling you, my brain's not working great right now. I've had a tough time all week with this.
Yeah, so you have that. You have the legal aid service, and also with the courts. So the courts can have these tools available for people, pro se litigants, or for people just to help them navigate the various paths that they would have to go through.
Oh, I combined two. Okay, so I did get all three. Okay, so one was built into software tools you're already using. The other is public interest organization, and the other one is legal consumers. Oh, and then I also had tools, AI powered tools for legal consumers. So like Hello Divorce or Just Fix or Beagle Plus, which are tools designed to sort of bridge the gap for legal consumers to help them create documents or get the information needed on their own, not necessarily through a court or a legal aid organization. That was the one I think I was missing. But yeah, so it was just interesting to kind of think of the different avenues that it, and even though I'm pretty cynical about AI, I always say I don't think that capitalism's ever going to trump altruism. I do think that all those different ways of bridging it are going to make a difference, just like with regulatory and licensure changes. The who, what, when, where, and how of practicing law is changing, and it's like chipping away at the foundations of how we always thought law firms had to be run, how you had to get licensed, who had access to that information and could provide it to others. That's changing, and AI is also kind of getting in the middle of that in terms of the actual provision of legal services. So those two different things, I talked about this last week when I was when our company had our RKO in Austin, where we all got the flu and half of us came back with the flu. But my talk was about the legal industry significant trends, and those were two of the big things that I talked about, was how AI and regulatory changes were really changing the who, what, when, where, and how of practicing law. And they kind of segue in together very nicely with each other. And they're making some really significantly changing things. So it'll be interesting to see over the next year how all that stuff kind of starts to settle, because it's kind of up in the air now and it's all going to come back down, and we're going to see what it really looks like at the end of this year. That's going to be crazy in any number of ways. So we'll see what everything around us looks like in about a year. So
Yeah, when you talk about trumping altruism, maybe you can find a new word for that.
I like that one. I think it's apropos.
All right, well, that takes us to the top of our hour and to the end of our show. Anything urgent? Anybody else had to mention quick before we wrap up? Otherwise, we'll thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll do this again next week. See you
Thanks,
then.
everyone.
Wow.